Week 18 Viva. What does Hildegard von Bingen's life tell us about European culture in the 11th and 12th centuries? We often think of the medieval era as uniform and unchanging. However, Europe did change dramatically during the Middle Ages. Hildegard von Bingen's life illustrates how increasing stability in the 11th and 12th centuries allowed Europeans to explore the deep questions of life. My first point is that there was a growing interest in the idea of direct revelation. Secondly, there was a debate about rationality and faith. And thirdly, there was intellectual and cultural growth. My first point is that there was a growing interest in the idea of direct revelation and mystical experiences. Hildegard von Bingen was a Benedictine abbess, theologian, and mystic. Her religious life began at the age of 7 or 8, when she was given to a monastery as a tithe because she was the 10th child in her family. Hildegard lived with her young aunt, Jutta, who was an anchorite. That meant that they lived secluded in a small room attached to a monastery and had very little communication with the outside world. Hildegard moved to a convent at the age of 14. She began to write and paint about her mystical revelations, of which she had experienced from around the age of 5. She insisted that they were from the Holy Spirit, who descended on her head like an octopus. She was taken seriously as a prophet, although it is very likely that she also suffered from chronic migraines. Hildegard's mysticism was representative of the flourishing of mystical practice and theorization that corresponded to the growth of new monastic orders under figures such as Bernard of Clairvaux and herself. The growing emphasis on one's personal experience of God led to an increase of Christian practices among the lay people. According to Evelyn Underhill, quote, "The great periods of mystical activity tend to correspond with the great periods of artistic material and intellectual civilization," unquote. This increase in mystical activity also allowed for growth in the respectability of female theologians, such as Julian of Norwich, who argues that despite her femininity, her teachings can be accepted because they are direct revelations from God. My second point is that there was a major debate at the time within Christianity between factions that emphasized the rational and others that focused on the emotional. Hildegard was obviously on the side that stressed emotional revelation. The principal theologian on this side was Bernard of Clairvaux. For him, the purpose of theology was to encourage the intense and profound experience of God. Essentially, Bernard believed that the goal of one's life should be to become lost in God's love in a mystical union that he described as spiritual nuptials. The leading figure for the other side was Peter of Abelard. He argued that we can only reach God through our rational minds and rational thoughts, and that trusting in your emotions just leads to heresy. Abelard was born in France, and he became the most famous teacher of the 12th century. He was a philosopher and a pursuer of classical thought. He taught theology at the University of Paris, and later at monasteries. He also had a dramatic life, and he argued with his colleagues in the church, which has sometimes led to his condemnations by other members of the church. Abelard introduced the term theology as we know it to the church. He did not encourage blind faith or simple adherence to tradition for salvation, but he instead encouraged a rational study of the scriptures. He wrote, quote, "It is by doubting that we investigate, and by investigating that we come to know the truth," unquote. So it is his opinion that doubting actually isn't a bad thing, and that it leads to actually becoming stronger in our faith. My third point is that Hildegard von Bingen was a proto-Renaissance woman. Her position in academic and artistic interests indicate a growth of intellectual curiosity and exploration. The stability of the 11th and 12th centuries not only allowed Hildegard von Bingen to emerge as a major theologian as a woman, but also to cultivate a wide range of knowledge on everything from linguistics to medicine. By the end of the 11th century in Europe, significant advances had been made in social organization and technology, intellectual pursuits, and education. According to John of Salisbury, who wrote in the 12th century, quote, "Our own generation enjoys the legacy bequeathed to it by which preceded it," unquote. So he would be writing about the intellectual growth that he had found in the 12th century, but also that it was founded upon thought and discoveries made by the great men and women of the 11th century. Hildegard von Bingen's pursuits included creating her own language called the lingua ignota and composing several books about natural history and medicine. One collection of her writings, known as the Physica, hands down Hildegard's knowledge of healing and includes many natural remedies for ailments, which may not be as completely useless as they were previously supposed to be. Some remedies include placing boiled marigolds on your stomach as a remedy against poison, eating poppy seeds for inducing sleep and stopping itching, and using stinging nettle as a cure for forgetfulness. In conclusion, although we might imagine that nothing changed during the medieval era, especially as regards to the status of women, Hildegard von Bingen's life illustrates how increasing stability in the 11th and 12th centuries allowed Europeans to explore the deep questions of life. First, it allowed for a growing interest in the idea of direct revelation. Secondly, a debate about rationality and faith. And thirdly, intellectual and cultural growth. Thank you.